morning and welcome to Rising. We are back with a very special show for you today. You might notice our new look. We are super excited about it. The team worked really hard on it, and I think it looks great. So welcome to the relaunched Rising. I'm so excited this morning to be joined here in studio by Briahna Joy Gray and Batya Ungar-Sargon. Ladies, what a momentous occasion this is.
Indeed,
it's great. What a treat to have all three of us in studio with this new look. I'm very excited about that and the content of today's show.
Yes. It's very exciting. Let's get right into it. In fact, Brie, why don't you take it away?
Well, Robby, former President Trump says he expects to be arrested this upcoming Tuesday in relation to the Manhattan District Attorney's investigation into the alleged hush money he paid adult film star Stormy Daniels. In a message posted to Truth Social on Friday, the former president said, quote, illegal leaks from a corrupt and highly political Manhattan District Attorney's office, which has allowed new records to be set in violent crime and whose leader is funded by George Soros, indicate that, with no crime being able to be proven, and based on an old and fully debunked by numerous other prosecutors fairy tale, the far and away leading Republican candidate and former president of the United States of America will be arrested on Tuesday of next week. Protest, take our nation back.
Now, this comes after NBC News reported law enforcement agencies are conducting, quote, preliminary security assessments, including plans in and around the Manhattan Criminal Court in preparation for a possible indictment this week. According to a spokesperson for the Trump campaign, the former president's team has not been in communication with New York DA Alvin Bragg's office. Quote, no one tells us anything, which is very frustrating. President Trump is basing his response on press reports.
Very interesting. So this might not come to pass on Tuesday,
Right.
I think is the immediate takeaway, is that we actually don't have any idea. However, it very well could be that this DA is moving toward, that there will be an indictment on these kind of hush payments for Stormy Daniels that were facilitated by Michael Cohen. Look, regardless of what you think about Trump or his underlying involvement in a complex web of potential criminality related to so many issues, I think there has to be some acknowledgement that this is one of the very weakest things to go after him on. You'd have to, it's not, frankly, a very serious charge anyway. It has to do with exactly how the money was made available to pay off Stormy Daniels. Did Trump know about that arrangement? Is he guilty of the mens rea, of actually being involved in that and knowing it was illegal? Maybe so, but this is it. To take the strong step of indicting a former president based on this aspect of it is something that I think is going to come in for a lot of criticism.
Yeah, and Donald Trump's point that the Attorney General ran on prosecuting him, it does raise the specter of whether or not this is politically motivated. That combined with the relative weakness of this potential charge, again, we don't actually know what the indictment is going to be. It does start to lead people to believe that this is, even if there is some underlying there, politically motivated, especially because many people are pointing out that when it comes to these kind of election law violations, Hillary Clinton, of course, was fined by the Federal Election Committee for payments investigating the Steele dossier. So this is one of those issues where were we talking about lock her up when we're talking about Hillary Clinton? Are the punishments that are being attached to Donald Trump going to be more significant because of the political implications of him actually running for president again? And what does it mean for us to live in a country where if it is the case that a relatively flimsy criminal charge is leveraged in what appears to be an effort to undermine a legitimate democratic process?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a shockingly bad move. Democrats love to complain about how, institutions are getting politicized, polarization is growing. They love to talk about how now you can't expect anything from the Supreme Court because Donald Trump had so many appointees. This is what an actually politicized judiciary and judicial process and criminal justice system would look like. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that anybody is above the law. Obviously, nobody is above the law. But when somebody has been elected president, they don't just represent themselves. They represent the choice of the body politic. If you want to be the side that cares about democracy, that has to mean something. You have to have a very high bar for prosecuting someone. And here what you have is an attempt to cobble together, like you both said, an extremely weak case based on the testimony of Michael Cohen?
Yeah.
But, he's second only to Avenatti in terms of credibility when it comes to these issues. I mean, to see this man being interviewed now on CNN like some sort of, hero because he's going after Donald Trump, and we talk about this all the time, brain worms. You can get, what was that we were talking about last week? Say what you will about Jeffrey Epstein, right? At least he knew the truth about Trump, right? Like, you could be a pedophile as long as, you criticize Donald Trump. It is so unbelievably distressing and dangerous to democracy, yes.
Yeah. Well, these developments come just after YouTube announced that Trump's account has been reinstated on the platform after it was banned back in 2021. The former president's Facebook account also reinstated last week. So far, he's kept to posting to Truth Social. I think possibly because he has some deal with Truth Social that they get his content exclusively, something like that. And also subsequently in a Truth Social post, he said he called for widespread protesting based on, if he's indicted, if he's brought in, there should be protests everywhere. I have to wonder how many of his, hardcore supporters who are still out there are going to get out of bed to do a protest on Trump's behalf, remembering how it went down last time. I mean, I think there are some feelings of betrayal that Trump didn't pardon any of those people. He didn't provide any funds to get them out of jail. He did nothing for the January 6th defendants. I did see some people on social media, some ardent MAGA people saying, yeah, I'm going to take a pass on this one because Trump wasn't there for his supporters when they were there for him. I
think the question of what he represents to his supporters is a really important one. And when they come after him from the highest levels of democratic institutions, that contributes to the view of him as a tribute for the people who also feel like they are the objects of derision and hatred and contempt of people at the highest level of democratic and liberal-leaning institutions. So when he goes to CPAC and says, I am your retribution, right? We can kind of chuckle at that.
Say it like he says it. I am your retribution.
Yeah, it's
meaningful.
I think that's a really important point. Because on one hand, you could argue the underlying case here, the nature of the Stormy Daniels accusations, is maybe something that certain Trump supporters might want to keep a little distance from. It's a little different than saying, well, I think the Democrats stole the election, our democracy is at stake. Donald Trump gave hush money to, an adult performer. Maybe I'll stay home from this one. On the other hand, the weaponization of the police state, of the government, is a big issue, a big motivating issue for Republicans. It was the motivating issue around the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago. And the question is, which one of those prevails? Moreover, are people a little wary of 1-6 and the kind of implication in the background that calling for people to come and protest and get into the streets has a little bit of the valence of what toppled over into illegal activity for so many people at the Capitol? And are people also going to want to keep their distance from him on that one?
I think you're right to bring up the Mar-a-Lago raid because that similarly was something that a lot of people in the mainstream media went, oh my God, this is it. This is it for Trump. Can you believe they did? He took these documents. Then it turns out that this was a very kind of stupid procedural crime that has been committed by like every person who has ever held office.
And look, there were meaningful differences. They asked for the docs a lot, but he didn't cooperate. Biden did cooperate. I mean, there are differences that I think are important not to pave over that caused the FBI to raid Mar-a-Lago when they didn't raid Biden's garage or whatever it was, and these other places that people have had documents they should not have had. However, I think your underlying point is correct, that oftentimes when Democrats pick at something like this, they expose a whole wealth of hypocrisy that gives legitimacy to some of the stuff that Donald Trump is doing. This is one of those situations where I gotta say, it feels like if you come for the king, you best not miss, right? Because you have the potential to galvanize a whole host of people who feel really like they are being persecuted, that Trump is their vengeance.
Well, and a lot of Republican political officials, even some who are now supposedly are being labeled as like non-Trump people, like Mike Pence, said that this was an abuse of power. This is a terrible thing to do. Kevin McCarthy said that. How do you think it affects the potential matchup between Trump and DeSantis? Do you think it's true that this does help Trump's potential reelection bid in the primary setting, even if I think there's probably very little argument it's helping him in a general. But
I mean, I feel like we're going to get like a Mar-a-Lago bump, right? He got a nice little bump after the Mar-a-Lago. But I think, speaking of the matchup, so CNN had a recent poll with some really interesting findings. They found that Trump was up an average of 55% to 26% over DeSantis among Republican voters of color. And when it came to Republican voters who make less than $50,000 a year, he was up 22 points over DeSantis, right? So that's the Trump base. Increasingly, people who are people of color who have moved to the Republican Party, they did so for Trump. Poor Republicans voted for Trump.
Because we're voting, that's a relatively small sliver of the base. 200
Republican voters were in the poll, yes.
No, I mean in terms of how many voters of color are actually represented in folks that support Donald Trump at all, I'm saying is still relatively small. But I think that is reflective of the fact that DeSantis is attracting more establishment, traditional Trump voters, and Trump is attracting populist voters. So Black people who are disaffected with the Democratic Party for really, I think, frankly, relatable reasons aren't going to be attracted to someone like DeSantis that seems like the same.
Conservative media had already anointed DeSantis the next Republican presidential candidate, and it ain't over yet.
Yeah,
we'll find out. Well, I'll tell you what's on my radar coming up next. Stay with us.